I wanted to get your perspective on growing up in Saudi because looking at the Rotana I see today and the Rotana I've done my research on, I have a respectfully tough time picturing you growing up in Saudi.
I mean, so what's the question? What was it like growing up in Saudi?
Yes, school, parents, social life. Did you feel like a
Yeah,
bit of an
yeah.
outsider? Did you fit
Um,
in?
yeah, I mean, I went to Saudi schools, and what that means is, yani, I studied, the curriculum that was given to us by the government that was very, very religious. We had like six religion topics, and it was segregated. It was an all-girls school, and صراحة, I have this show called Fucked and Blessed, which we'll get into later, but that show is named that because I feel incredibly blessed to have grown up in Saudiya. I felt a deep sense. I was religious growing up. I still am religious, but in a very different way. I feel very lucky to have been in the environment that I was because I really maintained my innocence. And when I say innocence, it's like my ability to know that my worth is inherent, my ability to have fun without a vice. That really, like, I developed that because of the environment that I grew up in. I understood what it meant to be, to hold life to be sacred, to hold my body to be sacred. I understood the value of ritual. And so these are things that I feel incredibly blessed to have grown up with. And also I felt a deep sense of belonging. Yani, one of the things that religion undeniably does is tie you to people in community, and you take care of one another. So I fucking love that shit, and I still love that. I still love it. And then of course on the other side, and so like I had friends, and I had such an innocent upbringing. Like I snuck out and I had a boyfriend, but other than that it was just super innocent. And I love that. So I did feel a deep sense of belonging, and at the same time, of course, I had like a dual identity. I mean, it's undeniable that especially when I was growing up at the time, there was no music in public places. Women couldn't sing. You couldn't show your body in any way. And I've always been aware of my body and its sexuality and the power that that holds. And so, yeah, in the privacy of my own room, I was dancing and moving like an animal, and masturbating and learning my body. وكل هذه الأشياء. And I believed that I was the worst person in the world because I was doing those things. I also knew that there was nothing wrong with it. So and he developed this extreme cognitive, spiritual, sexual dissonance from a very young age, which I think so many of us do from the Arab world.
That's interesting because you say you developed this cognitive dissonance, but that must have been extremely difficult because I mean, I grew up in Lebanon, and Lebanon is a lot more liberal than Saudi. I think your journey of self-discovery and figuring out what's good for you and what doesn't work for you, and your ideology is a lot probably easier than Saudi. I think in terms of, I just feel Saudi's more institutionalized. So how do you think you managed to discover that? Were you consuming content from the West that was, I don't know, opening up your eyes, or was it a personal thing, or?
That's a really good question. I think that I think that first and foremost, it's inherent in all of us, to be connected to our bodies and our sexuality, especially for women or women identifying beings. It's super inherent in us to understand, like, we fucking make life, and that is a product of our sexuality.
All right,
And
you don't
so
need to rub it in my face. I get it.
I'm
You guys
just
make life.
saying.
We help with
I'm
making
just
life
You
too.
help.
I mean, give us a bit of
You
credit.
help.
I know men have not had the best of the 2010s right now, understandably so, but we help. I mean, in the
You're
process. Just wanted to
important.
put that.
You're important too, but
Yeah.
the shit that goes down in our bodies is just like, it's actual magic. It's the thing that universes are made of. It's the Big Bang. It's creation energy, and so I think it's inherent in all of us, that we understand that these bodies are fucking powerful and magical. So that's one. The second thing is, yeah, I mean, my dad loved Sade. And Sade changed my life. Like, changed my life. Watching her perform, I was like, she's just the epitome of sensuality, but also she's like talking to the universe. And I don't know what the fuck is going on with Sade, but she really changed my life. And then also Alanis Morissette, even though I never saw her visually, but listening to her music and watching, well, not watching, but listening to this woman fucking unleash her rage was super liberating for me. And it like spoke to the part of me that was like, oh, that knew that somehow I'm an animal too. And like, we're all animals. And so I think a big part of it is inherent. I think it's part of my journey and who I was put on this earth to be. But I suppressed it deeply. Like I said, Yani, this was all in the privacy of my own room. This was not something that I showed anyone. And it really wasn't until I moved to the States that I even allowed myself to think that this might be actually a beautiful and holy and a thing that's of service, you know?
So what type of, because I mean, that's, you know, it takes a lot of thinking and a lot of self-discovery to deduce that. So obviously the people closest to you can help with that process. What about your parents? Were your parents like super laid back, super chill, liberal, understanding, or were they more on the conservative side of things?
My father is just such a badass. My dad is, I consider my parents to be very liberal in comparison to most people in Saudi Arabia, especially at the time that I was growing
I was gonna
up.
ask, yeah.
No, in Saudi context.
Okay, in Saudi context, not like, you know, compared to the Dutch or anything, but yeah,
no,
I get what you mean.
in Saudi context, they're super, super liberal. بس طبعا يعني it's, you know, maybe one day I'll feel ready to speak about it, but like I've definitely far crossed the line of what they feel is right or okay or safe. But at the time growing up, like I didn't have parents that told me that music was haram or, you know, your body was haram or any of that. But I believed it. They didn't need to fucking tell me. I went to Saudi schools. Like,
yeah, you're surrounded by it.
I wanted to, I was exactly like, I wanted to hijab. Can you hear me, by the way? We're breaking up.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you.
I remember it was, I think like 10th grade, and I told my dad, I was like, Baba, but hijab. And he was like, no fucking way. Ta'ali, if you still want to, the تبغى تتحجبي next year, if you still want to cover, then fine. But give it a year. So, yeah, and I was really blessed to have grown up with parents that were liberal in that sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, having parents who aren't, you know, they don't force their ideologies or their values onto you, I think is definitely a blessing, especially considering that, you know, it was Saudi at the time. And something, obviously, for people who do know you, something you've embraced and you've mentioned here is being sexually liberated. Hella, you know, respectfully, Saudi girl and sexually liberated is not maybe two and two you put together usually. So I wanted to ask you, what were you or were you not taught about sexuality in Saudi growing up?
What was I not taught about it?
Or were taught about it, you know? Could go both ways.
I was not taught anything about sexuality.
Okay, that's a pretty simple answer.
Literally nothing. I mean, okay, they did teach us one thing, which was, you know, they taught us about our periods. They also taught us that it is our duty to bring life into this world. It is our duty to please our husbands. And so basically we were taught that our pleasure is to serve God and men. That's all I was fucking taught. And it's such a shame. I am no scholar by any means, but I know that the Islam that I believe to be true is a very sex positive religion. We've unfortunately distorted it. But to answer your question, I didn't learn shit about shit. Like nothing. Nothing. صفر.
So what happens when you then go to the US? You know, like you've learned nothing about, you know, your sexuality, and all of a sudden you get put into a country where, you know, the US is fairly liberal, I guess you could say. So was it like a culture shock?
Yes and no. I mean, I grew up. I grew up coming to the States. I've been very privileged, and I went to college here. So, وطبعا بالسعودية يعني we watched American shows and stuff. So it wasn't like, oh my God, I've never seen a woman's body before. But, you know, I would actually argue with you that people and sexuality here isn't actually that liberated, contrary to what we might think. Like, and I'll get to your question in a second, but I just want to make sure that I hit this point, which is, I thought that too. I was like, I'm going to come to America and I'm going to figure out my sexuality, and because women there are liberated and they get it, and they're going to teach me. I'm going to figure it out from them. And I was very wrong, because Audre Lorde teaches us this. Audre Lorde is a Black feminist activist, author, and she's passed, but she has a whole essay about this called Uses of the Erotic. The erotic is power. And she talks about, like, just because someone's being sexual and they're wearing a thong and they're like twerking to WAP, there's nothing wrong with that. But that a lot of times, and I'm not saying this is Cardi B. Maybe Cardi B has her shit.
I mean, you said twerking to WAP, so
maybe. But listen,
shots fired.
No, Anjad, no. Maybe let me finish. So
okay.
You can do that. But the question is, like, sex is everywhere, right? But when you are expressing your sexuality, are you in deep feeling? Like, are you deeply feeling what you're doing? Do you understand why you're doing it? Do you understand who you're serving? Are you strictly doing this for the male gaze? Does it make you feel powerful? Does it make you feel, all of these questions that we don't fucking ask ourselves? But that is true liberation. And like Audre Lorde talks about it, it's like there's sensation without deep feeling, and that veers on the edge of pornographic. Like, that's what porn is, essentially. It's sensation without deep feeling. There's new types of porn and people that genuinely love. I'm not talking about that. So I just want to say that America hasn't figured it out either.
Yeah, it's maybe two different ends of the spectrum, but it's interesting what you said, because there's this argument which is like pleasure versus happiness, and pleasure can be very short-lived and instantaneous and can fill like a short-term craving that you might have, and then happiness is completely defined as something a bit more sustainable and long-term and intrinsic, you know what I mean? So it's interesting that you went really, it's pretty deep-rooted, the kind of journey you went on to discover this. And I think that obviously you spoke very briefly about Fucked and Blessed. By the way, that's a really good name, I have to say. When I was telling it to the boys who I record the podcast with, they're just like, yeah, she needs to trademark that name, because that's a winner. So would you mind telling us what...
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, would you mind telling us what Fucked and Blessed is about?
Yes. First of all, thank you. That name actually was born in a conversation between my dear friend Dina Shahabi, who's an incredible Saudi actor and artist. And we were sitting there talking about just our fathers and how restricted we felt. And we just came up with this saying, like, God, we feel so fucked because we come from such a restrictive culture, but we also feel so blessed because of all the things that I had mentioned earlier. It's funny because people think that that's not, they think it means like you got fucked, but that's not what it means.
I'll be honest. I have a dirty mind, so that wasn't my first thought. My first thought was
everyone has a dirty mind, and
says a lot about our culture.
No one will believe me that I didn't intend, or we didn't intend on that being what it meant, but here we are, and I'll probably be explaining it for the rest of my life, and that's okay. So Fucked and Blessed is really a product of everything that we talked about. I've been on this crazy journey of these, opposing sides of me, and the inner battle of, am I a terrible person? Is this wrong? It got to be way too much. And actually a book that completely changed my life that the show is really inspired from is called Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Marie Brown. And she actually makes the argument, it's interesting what you said about joy and pleasure. And I really, truly believe, and she does as well, that we need to reframe what it means to be in pleasure, because pleasure in its essence really means anything that brings you contentment, satisfaction, and joy. And pleasure is meant to also be sustainable and to shoot far out in the future. And it's not meant to just be this hit it and quit it thing and pleasure is everywhere. Anyways, Fucked and Blessed is a straight to camera educational comedy series where I talk about all of the shit that nobody told me anything about, that I was deeply confused and at war with myself about. We talk about pleasure, sexuality, eroticism, consent, boundaries, our periods, arousal, non-concordance, like all of why repressing sex does not work, all of these things that I wish someone had told me anything about. So it's just basically me talking to a camera and sharing all the things that I've learned, and kind of just stumbling through it all.
So I state very, very clearly in this show that I am by no means an expert. And the whole point for me of creating this show was I couldn't find the voices in the conversation of body liberation and sexuality that were stumbling through it. The voices that I found were Western and they were fully realized. And even if they weren't Western, they're just these incredible people that were like, "Khalas, I'm liberated. It's done." And I was like, where are the motherfuckers that are in process, And so I really wanted to show, and I look back at the show now as a year ago, and I'm like, wow, Baby Ro, you were so at the beginning of this journey. It's crazy how much can change in a year. But in addition to that, yes, I did an incredible amount of research for each of these episodes. I read a ton of books, checked in with the experts in my life, and I'm currently training to become a sex doula. And so,
wait, sorry, I have to interrupt you. A sex doula, that sounds like something Big would say. You know what I mean? Like a sex doula. You know what I mean, with that cadence that he has. So please explain to me what a sex doula is.
It's definitely new terminology. I actually just had a dream about it, and then I Googled it, and I was like, and I found a program. But a sex doula is, I prefer to not even use the word doula. But it's essentially what I'm learning how to do is teaching women and women identifying beings how to come back into right relationship with their sexuality, how to, by using tools of meditation and breath and movement and, all different sorts of exercises and therapy to really eliminate shame and come back to the understanding that your sexuality is a superpower. It's a gateway to the divine. It's a portal to healing your wounds, and just reframing sexuality and being like, this shit is not dirty. It's not gross. It's not bad. It's epic. And so I want to really guide women back to that experience of epicness. That's all sex doula is.
It's all about it's all about epicness. Yeah, that's a good slogan. 100%. So is this mainly targeted for Middle Eastern women, or because obviously this, a lot of this stems from your own personal experiences and seeing what isn't out there. So is this mainly for Arab and Middle Eastern women?
I've only finished level 1 of the training. I'm learning from the organization is called the National Black Doulas Association. So the women and the woman teaching us is not Middle Eastern. I don't have any Middle Eastern teachers. Unfortunately, I have not found them yet, but that's part of my journey, to really take this information, learn from it, and tailor it for Middle Eastern women, or for anybody, or for any woman really that has grown up in a very conservative, tightly wound environment. Because I think this spans really beyond Middle Eastern women. Bas طبعاً, I am Saudi, I am Muslim, I use the Arabic language to express myself, and I'm really excited to bring that into our sexuality. It's so rare that you even hear these words spoken in Arabic,
That's true, 100%. No, I think the idea definitely would resonate with a lot of people in the region. Anna, from our end, just from a personal perspective in Lebanon, we like to consider ourselves as fairly liberated, and the mentality is free and open, but it's a very hypocritical society. So, the laws don't represent the culture, and sometimes there's very big hypocrisies in the culture and a judgmental nature in our society. So I think a lot of girls, possibly even guys, maybe I know, could like something like this and could relate to it, and obviously the fact that you have your personality and you're bubbly and you're relatable could also be, you know, a really cool experience. It doesn't need to be this seedy, shameful topic, you know. It can be open and out there. And I think I saw something I did want to ask you, because obviously, you know, moving on to the subject of music. You mentioned something previously that in Saudi Arabia, music is banned, I think, everywhere or in most places.
هلا it's not anymore, which is
Not
amazing.
anymore, yeah.
بس when I was growing up, يعني there were no concerts were banned. Like, you know, public
Okay.
gathering with music was not. هلا in private parties, of course, people had music and there was radio and stuff. But like, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
just public gatherings and concerts were banned. And as a woman, it was most definitely not allowed. You were
Mm.
not allowed to sing in public. And alhamdulillah, those things have changed. But yeah, I grew like it wasn't even a part of my, you know, it wasn't even a real dream for me to become a singer because it was so out of reach, you know?
So given that context, what was the moment you were like, fuck, I can do this for a living and I'm going to pursue this dream?
Was it
Well,
when you were in the US?
the financial part we still have yet to figure out. I'm going to be very honest with you.
Okay, honesty is good. People need to hear
But
this.
yeah, like I'm not fucking swimming in it. This is the most challenging thing I've ever done. Like, um, it really is tough to be an independent artist. But the moment that I realized that this is what I was supposed to be doing was, yeah, after I moved here. You know, I don't want to act like there's a moment. I think it's really important to say that because I think people think that there are these like big revelatory incidents that happen. And for me, it didn't happen like that. It was just this instinct where I knew that I needed to go to the States and try to sing. I had never written a song in my life. I had never fucking sang it like in public, never did a concert, anything. I just knew that I needed, I don't know, it was intuition. That's the power of intuition. And then I got here, and really the thing that made me realize that this is what I was meant to be doing was that A, I felt fulfilled, and B, the universe kept bringing people towards me that taught me how to sing, that taught me how to perform, you know, like I really think that when you are on your path, shit comes to you, you know?
Mm.
Um, and I know, and that's part of the beauty of me becoming very connected to my body is that I feel when I am aligned. And I know
Mm.
that I'm most aligned when I'm making my music and doing my one woman show and doing Fucked and Blessed and having conversations like this with you. And, you know, I don't even see myself really as only a singer anymore. I'm a person that has shit to express, and music is a marketing tool for that expression.
Mm.
You know, I love to hear stories like this, especially from the Arab world, because, you know, we've spoken about this a lot on the podcast, but you get a lot of stigma and a lot of shit for deviating from the norm. And obviously your story, you definitely deviated from the norm, and you're pursuing your passion points and what makes you alive and what makes you feel fulfilled. And I also read that you had a job at Aramco, which is like the fucking Disneyland for Saudi Arabians. So for Saudi people, so that's not an easy thing to give up to go and pursue something that's a lot riskier in a land that you technically have no connection with. You know, you're kind of a deer in the headlights coming to the US and discovering things for the first time. So I have a lot of respect for taking those steps. I mean, it's big. And you said obviously finances are a huge issue. It might not be paying off now, might not be paying off in 2-3 years, but with persistence and hard work, who the fuck knows, you know?
بالضبط. And it's been a really huge, first of all, thank you. And it's been, you know, I've had to really shatter my ego over and over and over again and come back to like, why am I doing this? Because it can't be for the money, and it can't be for the fame or I don't even want to be fucking famous, but it can't be for validation, which is so fucking difficult because of course I want to be validated. Of course I want my show to be on TV. Of course, of course, of course. But if that's the reason, that I'm not going to be able to do this. It's not sustainable, you know? And so I've learned that the why is so much more important than like the what. Why
Mm.
the fuck are you doing this?
Mm.
Yeah, and I wanted to get your take on a few things. for anyone who doesn't know your music, who hasn't seen your music videos, you are, as we've said, as has been a theme in this talk, you're obviously very sexually liberated, and a lot of that comes out in your art and your music. I wanted to know, given some of the things I've watched from you, what was the reaction like in Saudi Arabia?
I'm guessing it wasn't great.
Well, actually, I mean, I think I really want to be careful to say that it was very nuanced. Like, it wasn't all one thing. And also, let's be real, you know. So I want to say two things. I'm not sexually liberated yet. I'm on my way.
Okay.
When I just also want to clarify that when we talk about sexuality, for me, it's talking about embracing that we are wild, that we at our base are wild and have animal instincts, and that's a beautiful part of us. So the reaction, there's multiple things that I have released. I mean, I don't even know how to bundle it up. It's like, do you want reaction from the culture, from family, from... I think that
It can be, yeah, it can be anything.
there's a
If you want,
lot...
I can give you my, yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, what your reaction was? I want to hear your reaction.
I can give you my reaction. I mean, my reaction was I thought it was cool. I think, you know, okay, I don't want to make it sound like I'm reading off of a black and white paper and just kind of, you know, maybe not giving it the justice that it deserves, but for me to see a girl from Saudi embrace her body and her art form and all of the elements that come attached to that was really cool, because let's be real, it's not in the norm of things. Like in the Middle East, I mean, even in Lebanon, it's not exactly in the norm. So for me, when I looked at you, when I look at the songs, when I look at the music videos, the social media channels, I think it's really cool because it's different and it's going against the norm. And for me, it's going to bring stigma 110%. Yeah, if you sit down and take a selfie, you're going to get stigma. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's people are going to hate and attack, and that's regardless of anything you do. But especially with what you're doing, I can imagine that. So it's two sides of the sword, if you want. It's a lot of people probably back home, and I don't know, maybe you can answer me this, were like, wow, you know, look how confident she is, look how expressive she is, and this is really helping me, and thank you for doing what you're doing and for speaking out, and I can really resonate with everything you're talking about. I'm assuming that there was this reaction.
Absolutely. And we'll start
Okay.
there because why not start with the beautiful stuff? There has absolutely been a huge resonance of women, trans humans, queer people that have really resonated and you know, have just like you said, just said deep thanks for me taking these steps to say, hey, there's literally nothing shameful about this. So there's been so much support and so much love, you know, within my community, Kamana here in LA. I have, you know, my Arab family here, and they've been so incredibly supportive. So there's been so much beauty. And there's also been, you know, a lot of disgust. I think it's really hard for people in Saudi Arabia and anyone from conservative cultures to really see a woman being wild and being sexual. I think we are trained to believe that our sexuality is disgusting, kind of everywhere in the world, really. We are trained to believe that our sexuality is separate from things that are good and high and moral. And so there was a lot of disgust, you know, a lot of like, you've lost it, you're on drugs, you're possessed. And that used to be really difficult for me, but it has evolved because now I understand that, you know, this is a quote and it's not mine, but like, people can only meet you as far as they've met themselves. And so whatever anybody is feeling towards me is it's just a projection of how they actually feel about their own sexuality, you know, and it's absolutely their right to feel it. But it doesn't punch a hole through my heart anymore. But I really want to, and so there's been a lot of cultural backlash, familial backlash, everything. All of that has happened. And I also want to say that, like, this is not exclusive to Saudi Arabia. This shit goes down literally everywhere in the world. Sexuality is so repressed. And this is a bigger issue. It's not even about bodies and sexuality. This is about having a revolution about the way things work. Because right now, the way things work is that system tells me, this system tells me how to behave and what's right and okay. And what I'm getting to is, no, the system is inside, actually. And embracing our bodies and our sexuality is simply a tool to come back to our own inner system.
It's interesting to see how kind of holistic you view things and the way that you think about things. For me, I don't know, maybe I'm going to sound a bit like caveman mentality, or I'm going to kind of dumbify things. But for me, it's do whatever you want. If you're not harming anyone physically, emotionally, then why the fuck should anyone have okay, let people have opinions, freedom of speech for sure, but why should it concern you? Do you know what I mean? Like, and this may be something I'm kind of simplifying my thought process and my logic, but even the people I surround myself with, it's like, just do whatever the fuck you want. I mean, if you're not harming anyone, if you're not harming yourself or the people around you, why is this a topic of discussion? Why is this an issue? You know, I mean, that's just kind of how I view things.
Live and let live. Like, it's not even it's simple, but it's super powerful. And like, nobody on this planet, I mean, a lot of us have, but most people on this planet have not fucking figured that out.
Yeah. And I don't want to sound like a hippie from Woodstock selling love beads, you know, on the side of my caravan. Like, dude, just live and let live, and it's all about freedom and love. But yeah, kind of, I mean, it kind of is. It kind of is. Like, I mean, you make fun of the hippie, but like, shit, he looks like he has his priorities in line. Like, that seems like a chill life. He doesn't seem like he has any, you know, his brain isn't eating him in from the inside with his anxieties and insecurities. So that's, 100%. Something I did also want to ask you, you know, we touched a bit upon the Middle East and, you know, reaction in Saudi Arabia, but coming out to LA in the West, I see a lot of articles about you, and I wanted to get your take on this, that focus a lot more on your background and where you're from and your religion rather than your music. So I wanted to get your take. Do you see a lot of that happening in the US?
Yeah, I think that, yes, I think that absolutely there is a tendency here to really fetishize and sensationalize, you know, our struggles. And my struggle as an Arab woman, as a Muslim woman, as a Saudi woman. And I will say, and I talk about this in my one woman show, is that it's a really complicated issue. First of all, that doesn't really happen anymore because I stopped. My one woman show was a product of me being so sick of exactly what you're talking about and saying, "Khalas, no more interviews. I'm gonna write a fucking show about my life. You don't get to narrate my life anymore. I'm gonna narrate my life." Literally, that's where it came from. But it's also super complicated because, you know, my art is totally all about my background, where I come from, reckoning with my definition of God, with what I believe Islam is, with my body, with my mother, with my father. Yani, it's complicated because the truth is that's literally the source of all of my art. Kaman, it's complicated because, yes, it's sensationalized. Yes, it's fetishized. And also some of it is true. You know, but the notion that I am challenging with my one woman show is stop making our fucking struggle all we are. You know, stop it. Like I'm really sick of that. I'm sick of our struggles being who we are. And it's so ingrained in me to the point that, you know, this book, Pleasure Activism, that I talked about by Adrienne Marie Brown, was really revolutionary for me for so many reasons. But one of them was because I don't know how to embrace, I'm learning, but I really struggle to just like be okay, to be joyous, to be all right. Like, I'm not struggling, then shit, like what's going to happen if I'm not struggling? Is everything like, is the world going to fall apart? Are people going to forget that I exist? Am I still going to be loved? Will I have people around me if I'm not struggling? You know? And I think that shit runs deep for a lot of us. By the way, has anyone cursed as much as me on this podcast?
I mean, let's quantify what a curse is. You said shit a lot, so that's up there.
And the
So
F-word.
You've okay. I think you're definitely leading the races for shit. I'm not sure about fuck. I do say fuck a lot. Actually, funnily enough, I had my parents come to me and give me many interventions. They're like, please stop saying fuck on the podcast. Like our friends watch the show.
Don't let them listen to this. Don't let them listen to this episode.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I'll tell them to avoid.
Baba.
I'll tell them to avoid this episode for sure.
No, look, I think a lot of what you're saying is I mean, not even opinion based. To me, it's factual, and something I did want to get your take on. Saudi, or people now are in this kind of mentality that Saudi is opening up, and Saudi has become a lot more liberal than the Saudi I'm sure you grew up in. Women can drive. That's the big thing that everyone is talking about now. Movie theaters are opening up. The art scene is growing at quite a rapid rate. So I wanted to ask you, do you see yourself moving back to Saudi, continuing music there, or is this not something that's viable for the time being?
I want nothing more than to be able to go back to my home country and be the artist that I am. Currently, I don't believe that it's viable. And you know, I have this song called Stuck in America that's exactly about this. I get a lot of shit sometimes from people that are like, what are you complaining about? You're in America and you don't even love your country. You could have stayed here. And I'm like, do you not fucking get it? Like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I love my life here, but home is home, you know? And it's my job is to just continue doing me as authentically as possible, and I can't force anything to catch up to me or to embrace me. I think where I am is very radical for still, you know, it's too much for right now. And I can see it reflected in the way that, you know, people generally like really are careful to engage with me, whether it be in a publication or beyond, and that's very telling. And I have so much love and respect for that process. You can't rush it, but I'm not going to wait, you know, and so that's why I'm here.
Yeah. You know, you said something I think a lot of people can relate to, especially a lot of our listeners who are, you know, we have a big portion who are Lebanese expats. Like, we don't want to go to the West necessarily, or Europe or the US. Not that they're not beautiful places, but we're going there essentially for opportunity, for a better life, socially, mentally, but obviously, you know, to get a job and to make a career. But who the fuck doesn't want to live back in their homeland? You know what I mean? Like, you're ingrained, your culture is ingrained, the way you think, the way you act, your mannerisms, your social cues, it all stems from your homeland and where you are. And I can bring this back to Lebanon. Lebanon, I'm also kind of very 50-50 and conflicted like you, because Lebanon, on one hand, is one of the most stunning places in the world. It's this beautiful, tiny slice of heaven, and you'll get the usual shtick and bullshit from the mountains to the sea and whatever the hell. But also, it has become so corrupted and so corrosive, especially over this past year, although it's been building up from a while, that for most people, I would argue for all people, it's just not viable to live there anymore. Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for your well-being, physically, emotionally, financially. And we get people coming and talking to us saying, can you talk about how the younger generation should stay and should fight and try to create a better future for Lebanon? I can't do that. You know, I don't know if you can relate to this, but I can't be that spokesperson, because I can completely understand a young person wanting to leave. It's you know, it's heartbreaking, but it makes complete sense for their future, for their careers, for their lives, for their loved ones. So the life of an Arab expat and the life of an expat is fucking tough, and it can be shit. But at least there's a large diaspora out there who can, you know, we can have chats like this and talk about how, you know, life is a bit tough.
Yeah. I have goosebumps. Thank you for sharing that it's a really difficult journey. And it's very sad, but it's also, you know, I think that there's a lot of work to be done in from this space, you know, of constantly feeling in the middle, constantly like feeling like you don't fully belong somewhere. That is where we create from, and inshallah we will create these third spaces that allow people to, you know, come into these third spaces and unfold safely and know that they belong. But it starts with us. It starts with us creating shit like this. So yeah, blessings to the journey.
Rotana, it was a pleasure to meet you, a pleasure to talk to you. For anyone who hasn't seen you before, where can people check you out? I know you have your YouTube page. By the way, when you type Rotana into YouTube, you get, which is a bit unfortunate for you, get this fucking massive Saudi music label with 18 million subscribers. So
fucking worst. I need to figure out what to do with my name. Thank you, Al Amir Walid bin Talal. Thank you so much for your Rotana empire.
Yes.
Instagram is really the best place to find me and to follow my work. It's at I am Rotana, IAMROTANA, and I post everything there. And yeah, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to see you guys on Fucked and Blessed.
100%. Yeah, guys, check out Fucked and Blessed, of course. One of the best names on YouTube, that's for sure. And pleasure talking to you. Hopefully we can do this live sometime soon.
Inshallah, Habibi. Thank you so much.